Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are, of course, on Escape from Tarkov PVE. So, without further ado, let's jump in how to use Scavs to your advantage. And I ain't talking about the actual Scavs that you can play in-game. I'm talking about the ones that you'll be facing when you play any of your maps. And there's a few different things that I tend to do since 1.0's full release that seem to be pretty damn cracked, because Scavs generally used to be something that I wouldn't even bother going up and checking, because most of the time they had diabolical loot. However, with the changes that Scavs have actually had, they seem to be, let's just say, pretty damn lucrative if you want to make some good gear and good items, because yeah, I mean, I found 2 marked room keys, as in we found the first one being abandoned factory marked room, and I also found shared bedroom marked room. Obviously, it could have been any of the marked rooms. Unfortunately, it was just like the cheapest one. But in terms of like value of the loot, like it's also been insane finding bitcoins, finding rares on the actual Scavs, and we're also finding like, you know, generally GPUs, that sort of stuff, high tier tech items, all sorts, power filters I found on Scavs as well. And there's a couple reasons for that I'll delve into in this video, and how you can actually farm it the best. So number one is that Scavs, obviously, the best way to determine whether or not it's actually worth going up and checking a Scav in Tarkov's PvE mode is to essentially look if they've got a backpack. If they haven't got a backpack, typically it's not worth going up and checking them. Now, yes, you can potentially find some cash, so you can find rubles on the Scav in the pockets, you can find occasionally some keys, you can find a keychain on them, but for the most part, the actual valuable loot tends to come in their backpack. Like, I've never really found too many marked keys in the actual pockets of a Scav. So unless they've got a backpack, I pretty much won't bother checking them. So there's that feature to it. But there's also a couple of other things, which is that the best map that I found to be just farming Scavs in general is playing on the streets of Tarkov. Now, you might be thinking, why would you play Streets of Tarkov over any of the other maps? Well, that's just because there are a ton more actual Scav spawns. So even things like interchange, if you do run in the middle, but obviously at the moment with the 75% boss spawn rate / 100%, I don't know if it's been confirmed anywhere, it's around 75 to 100%. Boss spawns. For me, I think it is 75 because I didn't meet Sturman yesterday when I did actually play a raid on Woods. He wasn't there. So, yeah, I think it's 75% to be honest. But with that being said, obviously, when you're running on interchange, when you're running on the streets of Tarkov, there's a lot more Scav spawns that just generally are dotted around the map, which means obviously you get more Scavs, more chance at getting them good loot, more chance with them to have a backpack. But there's also another thing, and that is that the longer you are in a raid, the bigger like loot you're going to find within all of these different Scavs. So if you start off at the beginning, you know, you run directly forward and you meet your first Scav. There's one Scav or whatever, and you take them out and you check, and pretty much every time you're finding that they don't really have anything on them, to be honest. And so you're going, okay, but not really worth checking Scavs. And because that's like your first interaction in your raids is checking the first Scav, and you're like, oh, it's got nothing on it, you probably don't tend to check too many Scavs later on down in the line on PvE. So what you want to do is essentially always check late game Scavs. The longer the raid goes on, the more loot that they spawn with, because they're trying to reenact the fact that they're going to be like actual Scavs, player Scavs or whatever. You know, on PvP, we obviously have player Scavs which come into the raid at like the 20-minute to 25-minute mark sort of thing, basically, as like a base. Obviously, the higher your Scav rep, the higher the chance of them having better stuff on PvP, like and getting into the raid faster, so sometimes you can find them in the raid much quicker. But essentially, the later game in the raids is going to find Scavs with a lot more gear, is essentially what's happening on PvE, as you're finding things that have, you know, 2 weapons on them, scavs with 2 weapons, and they typically are the ones that you definitely want to check, because when I've checked the scavs with 2 weapons, they typically have good hideout items in them, they have good loot in general. Even if you play things like customs, it's the exact same thing. You want to be taking out all of the scavs that you possibly can, and actually looting them up. And in fact, some of the most valuable stuff I've found so far through this playthrough, and I'm at level 22, I believe now, on Tarkov, was on scavs. It was not on PMCs. It was not actually searching containers and stuff. It's been from literally scavs on their own. So that has basically been funding me whilst I'm just doing my tasks. And then obviously you can add in proper loot runs on the streets. That I did a video yesterday. If you're watching this video on release, you can go check out yesterday's video. If not, it is on early game kind of loot farming, because we do now have the item requirement, like to be able to sell things on the flea market at the moment. So yeah, it's essentially a really, really good way to not only stack out your hideout stuff, but also get yourself a ton of reballs at the exact same time. So I think it's just been severely underrated. Lots of people running past scavs, and I wanted to showcase it off today, just so you'd understand, yeah, I should actually be checking scavs because they're pretty broken. And obviously you get some XP from taking out scavs as well. So you should be using it as like an additional loot run, plus you don't actually have to go around and loot anywhere, which is always good, and you get a ton of search XP and attention skill leveled up as you're kind of looting stuff. So always be looting as well, especially the big containers, you know, the technical supply crates, that sort of thing. So you can level up attention and search at the same time. So you don't want to end up like too far in one skill and have not actually ended up leveling up anything. So yeah, just add that into every single one of your runs. Make sure that you do take out scavs in the end of your raids. It's the end. I don't tend to check them within the first 10 minutes. It's always the end of the raid is where I've found the best loot tends to be on scavs. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.